I think that's why sport has so much potential, but it's almost like we've tied it down.
Yeah.
And that's heartbreaking to me. The experience I had of doing that pull-up in Pure Gym in Sheffield was a spiritual moment for me. The whole conversation about sport and gender is the exact opposite of that moment, and that's what most people experience.
This idea of living in a spectrum and trying to understand that as an experience. Is that fair to say? A moment that I really cherish from our gym work was you getting your chin up. Yeah.
I just said to you earlier, I hope I can still do it, because you said it was a good moment for you, and then I don't want to let you down by the fact that now I can't replicate it.
You finished on 4 reps, I think.
Yeah, I could probably still give 3 a good go.
Yeah, I reckon so.
I reckon so.
It's one of those where once you've kind of breached the dam, once you've got the skill, once your nervous system knows how to do it, it's a skill. Mm-hmm. And then it's not necessarily about strength, it's about application, setting yourself. There are lots of different techniques in the gym that people can force into completion. Things like a muscle up, you'll see people chicken wing it, where they're using their joints rather than skill or muscle, which is frustrating because that's where injuries come about. Whereas actually once you know how to grip the bar and to use your biceps and your back and maybe a little bit of your rear delts, all of which you can identify of course now.
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Then actually you start to work in concert with yourself, and then having that appreciation of what your body can do in space is just so wonderful. And when you turned around to me after that first one, the fist pump.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you'd won the Grand Slam. It was your moment. Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of coaching in many disciplines, but obviously in sports, obviously in the gym, is when you see a person win.
Yeah. And I think for me that was a big part of again, it was all accidental. I just wanted to get fitter. And then I hadn't ever spent time thinking about my rear delts before. And then, I think it was as soon as I achieved that, and it felt like I was, I don't know, accessing a different version of myself, a different ability. Then I think my non-binary-ness has only become more comfortable to me, if that makes sense. Probably opening up a whole category of leaning into more masculine clothing, but less intentionally. I think before I was trying to work out what non-binary should look like and just copy that. I think something genuine happens to you, like, oh, I'm achieving this pull-up, I feel like myself, unlocks just a bit of a natural move into comfort in your own skin.
Can I ask, and it's obviously to do with language, and language shapes us all, necessarily. I've used the example before of Tauben Grau and Duck Egg Blue. So to an English speaker, Duck Egg Blue is a light pale blue, yeah? And Tauben Grau is the same colour, but Grau means grey. Mm. Now, it might be that in a slightly different part of Germany, it's Tauben Blau, But I've definitely seen it in print, Tauben Grau equals Duck Egg Blue. And I think that's interesting because we are looking at the same thing, but giving it a different name. When you talk about non-binary-ness, that's obviously not one thing.
No.
That could be 2 people looking at the same word and have completely different experiences.
Yeah.
But the same could be true of our binary terms. For instance, what does it mean to be masculine? What does it mean to be feminine? What does it mean to be non-binary? I think it's this idea of living in a spectrum and trying to understand that as an experience. Is that fair to say? Yeah,
and I think you've touched on the concept of living between categories, which I think, I came out as non-binary and realised quite late on in life that fitted how I understood my identity. So I was just past 30, so maybe 32. And for me it was, I didn't know it existed. I didn't know you could identify as non-binary. It's not a great term. It's probably just to define your something in the negative, but it'll do. I mean, it literally means you don't fit into a category. And I think maybe 5 to 10 years ago, there was maybe a zeitgeist or a cultural acceptance of the idea of fluidity of spectrum. I think there was a lot in TV characters coming out talking about their sexuality as a spectrum. There was a great line in Schitt's Creek, which is a really great series written by Dan Levy, where he's pansexual and he's talking about I like the wine and not the label. And I think people were happy with us all just enjoying the wine for a while. And then I would say, particularly in the past 2 years, that we are actually back into our labels again. Big time.
I obviously only want to talk about politics for the relevance to conversations, because it's another rabbit hole, and I think that you have people identify again as left or right, and then suddenly there's a whole tranche of arguments or beliefs that you're supposed to have because you're leaning one way or the other, rather than again living on the spectrum and understanding that not one side is right. But given how one of the biggest countries in the world has shifted further to the right, do you feel that has had an impact in what you're describing?
100%. I would say people are much more interested in, putting everybody back into their categories. I think we were about to tolerate, and I'm speaking quite broadly actually, I think maybe I'm talking about popular culture rather than kind of smaller groups of society where what we're saying is of course, kind of subcultural movements. But I would say in mainstream culture, I think we are back to a man as a man, a woman as a woman, Western values versus Russian values or Eastern values. I think we're back to the idea of, the right to defend a country, back to a bit of the kind of nation state nationalism. And this is not a surprise because these types of beliefs often come together. I think particularly in sport as well, the arrival of the Supreme Court judgment means that we're back into arbitrating who cannot be in a category. So not only are we not comfortable with, we're not enjoying our wine anymore, we're interested in the labels on the bottles, we are now dictating who can be in which bottle. I've taken that metaphor way too far. Roll me back in.
The way that you've just described it, I've not thought about that before, which is really interesting.
It just came to me, Jack.
You're a genius, that's what it is.
Yeah.
So the idea of telling people that they can't do something, that it's that some people are not allowed, like you say, it's exclusionary rather than inclusionary.
Yes. So putting women who have elevated levels of testosterone in the same category as trans women.
Which wouldn't come into normal discussion, I think, at any level other than, it seems, sport. And sport almost feels like a proxy. It's like sport washing a popular perspective. That we need to have these categories for the safety of the competitors.
Yes.
Say that half of my assigned female at birth clients would tell me about having PCOS. And many of them would present as pretty feminine, other than their ability to build muscle, for instance, and would definitely identify as women. And some of them as, I'm just a little woman, don't look at me. Women.
Yeah.
And yet they wouldn't be able to compete because on paper, based on this test, I find that fascinating, because I am interested obviously in the safety of competitors and in people not being injured. And as a maybe point of interest rather than a point, when I played my first game of rugby, I was 11 and probably weighed about 6.5 stone. I couldn't put that into kilos quickly, maybe like 42 kilos, I think that is. Maybe a bit less. And the first person that I had to tackle easily weighed 60 kilos, to the point where they looked like they'd been held back a couple of years, because I was essentially up to tackle a full-grown man. Somebody who had hit puberty and had the full blast of testosterone, which meant that they were bigger, hands were bigger, quicker, stronger, bones denser. This is a very specific David Goliath moment. And I can understand from the perspective of contact sport, where there can be brute, so to speak, against say, more skillful, lighter people, that there's a very risk of being crunched. You have weight classes, you have skill classes, you have ways to be inclusionary. You know, if we are talking about the best of the best, then everybody should be able to compete. That would be the dream, I think, where it is based on merit. But when you're going to think about the punching power, the raw aggression, the ability to shift things, then I do think, you know, people who have been blasted with testosterone, whether naturally or exogenously, are going to have more of an advantage than people who haven't been. And I don't think that's an unfair point to make, because, you know, there are people who assigned female at birth who would take exogenous hormones in order to have an advantage, in order to gain more muscle than would be naturally possible. And this is the issue with sport, is that we all would like to play at some level. Play is so important and everybody should be able to play, but many people want to win. And of that subset, particularly when we get to elite sports, and there's a greater instance of psychopathy in elite athletes, people who are willing to push through pain and to train harder.
What is psychopathy?
Psychopathy is, so you can't be diagnosed as a psychopath. So in the very first podcast with another guest, Alexander Smith comes on. He's working at the University of Bern, and his specialism at the moment is looking at psychopathy in elite sports. So it's displaying tendencies that we would have previously assigned to a psychopath.
Interesting.
So risk-taking behaviours.
Yeah.
Likely to defraud teams or governing bodies, maybe teammates even. Lying, cheating, basically doing anything to win or to gain an advantage, however small. And that could be taking steroids, it could be the likelihood of taking a risk, it could be even putting a little motor on your bike. Like, professional cycling is crazy for the ways in which they'll dope or cheat. Before this conversation, I was trying to look into the extent of it. I think there's basically 7 or 8 years of Tour de France winners who've been wiped off the slate. And you have to go from rank 1 down to 10 to find somebody who on paper hadn't cheated in some way, which is crazy. So yeah, I think it's, in sport, an interesting discussion, but it has to come from a place of merit, and it has to come from a place of just real world, what are we actually talking about? You know?
We could easily sit here and have a conversation about what's the appropriate level of testosterone that makes you a man. We could go into that hole, though. I think this argument does often go, which is when you look at the trans man and the journey they go through and the testosterone and their physicality and how literally bodies are reshaped, there's no way that human is not a man and would be able to compete hands down, similarly with trans women who spend, you know, a lot of time on estrogen. And it's you know, we can fall into the trap of going, well, what is a swimmer like Michael Phelps? You know, his feet were notoriously, was it Michael Phelps? Was it Ian Thorpe? You know, inbuilt advantage. We could fall into that type of argument. But I think what's more interesting and what isn't spoken about enough is who can compete and who can't compete. Why are we placing competition, winning, above compassion? If somebody feels, if it's super affirming and they believe that they want to compete in a female category, subject to, you know, not lifting something crazy, what is so wrong with that? Well, the argument is, well, they would beat everybody. It wouldn't be fair. But it's interesting that we, in society, probably since the first Olympic Games, that is the thing that we are most concerned about, is winning and the fairness of being able to win, rather than how a human feels. And I know that's a bit idealistic. I know I'm not knocking competition. I'm not knocking the free market to compete to get the best of human intelligence and blah, blah. But I think it's interesting how these arguments over who is a man, what level of testosterone can you have to be put in this category? We're putting people in categories to level the playing field so that people can fairly win, rather than thinking about people as human beings and enjoying sport together. I'm not advocating for the end of competitive sport. I just think it's a very interesting mindset that most of this conversation circles around, is fairness to win. And I think it should be much more about fairness
To play.
To play.
Yeah. I really do believe, based on my experience in the gym, as somebody who didn't find sport or exercise or fitness enjoyable or fun or for me, for my body, until I was like 24, 25, that the opportunity to find what it is that you can do and move in best or most enjoyably, everybody should have that. And also I'm going to push for people moving generally, and the idea of overthinking coming from undermoving. Yeah, I think a lot of, I'll say it as a general thing, but when we struggle with our mental health, there is often a link with our physical health, often a link with our spiritual health and sense of self, and a good walk or hike, or just taking your head from the very space that it's in where you're feeling all of these things and putting it on top of somewhere in the Peak District or underneath Sheffield train station if you go on a walking tour for, I've forgotten the name of it, the Megatron. Yeah. It just completely changes your outlook. But you have to leave where you are. You have to physically move from the discomfort that you're in sometimes to improve your mental health, to improve your sense of self. You know, coming back from Mexico, for instance, spending 4 weeks in a completely different country, speaking a completely different language as much as I could, I felt very, very different. You know, there wasn't like a complete absence of depression or of negative affect or anything like that. There were still moments of loneliness and sadness, but there were lots of moments of joy, lots of moments of this is very new and exciting, and these people who I've not met from everywhere in the world are saying hello, you know, and asking me how I am, and that's great, you know. So I think that is an idea. Everybody should be able to find the thing that works for them. The bit I just want to support your point. It's an interesting one that, again, Alex brought up and I had not thought of. Capitalism as part of the reason why competition is there.
Oh.
And it's because...
Always comes back to capitalism, viewers.
You've got prizes to aim for. And people want to win, but I think something that we've not touched on in the competition argument is that people don't want to lose, and people don't want to have lost because they feel like somebody's cheated or had an unfair advantage. And I think that's where it comes back to. So then the competition bit, I don't think we're going to escape from it because of that thing. It has been shown in different lab studies, and I think we can relate to it as humans, the idea that it hurts more to lose 5 pounds than the feeling of winning 20, if that makes sense. So like the valence, the emotionality of it, losing 5 pounds feels more than winning 20 in different lab studies. Yeah. And it might not be specifically those amounts, but I think that's also a big part of where it comes from. And if you lose to something that you don't understand, that also ties into it, and that's an identity bit. And again, you're looking at yourself, wondering where you went wrong, and it's much easier to pin it on somebody who's cheated rather than you not being skillful enough, or quick enough, or whatever it is, not having put in the work. So we're always looking for a scapegoat, whether that is competition or in other people, seems to be.
I think there's a lot in what you've just been talking about. There's the idea of moving and thinking, which is linked to the Enlightenment, and Rousseau, who was one of the earlier thinkers of the Enlightenment in France, would walk everywhere. I think there's a whole book which we should find and put in the show notes about walking and its link with human development and thought. So you bang on about that. Then there's the idea of change and putting yourself, the power of moving out of the familiar, which is something I think is crucial to understanding how to live with other human beings, but is harder for some people than it is others. And then lastly, you know, there's I've forgotten my train of thought. I'm so sorry.
No, you smashed it. Those two things are amazing. The third bit we were talking about...
Went back to competition, didn't we?
Yeah. And the element of prizes.
That was it. And then you're talking about shame in losing. And I think ultimately why people categorise, there is a fear, there's always fear, And then there's the shame, which is often linked to, oh, I don't want to lose to this person who is maybe female. And what's that is, that's a cultural expectation.
Have you come across Babe Ruth? I don't know my baseball. I don't know ball, to use an expression in this instance. But there was a moment when Babe Ruth and the second top baseballer of the time were both bowled out, for want of the proper terminology, by a woman. And the reaction that Ruth has to this is unbelievable. He's so angry that he's been fairly, 3 strikes, completely fair from the footage I've seen. I think it's 1931. There's black and white footage. It's on Facebook, if not on one of the other platforms. And she didn't just strike him out. There was another guy after him. You know, you had 1 and 2, and they were fairly bowled out by a 17-year-old woman. Amazing to watch.
Yeah.
And I think this idea of not being embarrassed, not being shown up as much as anything else.
Yeah.
You know, because to my mind, if this can be done, then why wouldn't you have a mixed team based on merit?
Yeah. It makes no sense that we're competing in gender sport, in my humble opinion, as somebody that isn't a doctor, a physician, a competitive sports player, because I've missed my calling, unfortunately, in my late 30s to achieve that. It makes no sense to me that we talk so much about competition, and we've mentioned how that's the ultimate prize, is to compete and win and making sure everything's fair. We're so obsessed with that.
Now, just using the kit that you see here, wherever I am in the world, it is a treat to put these episodes together. If you've enjoyed them, if you have found yourself watching multiple of them, then I've got a favour to ask of you. And it's not your money. It is just a second to like what you like. Maybe a couple of seconds to leave a comment on what you enjoyed, what you changed, what you might have asked the guests, and maybe to ask me to bring on somebody or to discuss a topic that you're interested in. The last thing is to subscribe if you haven't already. Most people will watch an episode, maybe watch a couple in a row, but not subscribe. And yet that could be a massive sign to all those algorithms that you are interested in what fitness and thinking is all about.
The Olympics, sports, Colosseum Games were put on as a distraction usually from poorly run societies. You know, there may have been moments of abundance, but often when you had big events, and lots of big events in a row, it was to mask the fact that things were collapsing and that funds were being embezzled and that maybe wars weren't being won at home. And I wonder if maybe this fixation on competition and sport and not being shown up and not being embarrassed, that permeates through everything from sports to politics to interpersonal relationships, work, friends, whatever. It just comes down to this idea that we're not actually addressing any of the real issues going on, and we're looking for things to have an argument that we feel we can win and be dominant in. Again, arguments that we can win, rather than actually just having conversations that don't have defined answers, rather than accepting that people aren't fixed objects. And I
agree, and I think I do think it's ironic that if we're so interested in winning, we won't just take merit, the best people that can play the sport at that particular time. It has to be men or it has to be women. If you were to mix a team, I think there's a counter argument. Could that team therefore be more competitive? I think the big irony about it is I feel like we could push further in human endeavours with the cross-pollinisation of femininity and masculinity and strength and gentleness and all of these terms that are thrown around to describe one side or the other. A mixed team, I think, could do and achieve more. So I think it's really interesting that we're holding up competition, but it has to be competition by sex. And I think sometimes that could be shooting people in the foot.
So I played in a mixed netball team, for instance, and absolutely adored that. I adored that because it was a way for me to get into a sport that I wouldn't otherwise have been able to get into. And, you know, perversely in some way, when I first started, it was a way for me to get into a team at all, because everybody who was playing would identify as a woman. In women's teams, there weren't teams for men or for non-women. I was completely taken out by people who were 5 foot tall, and I was more skillful in 6'6" players. you know. So that felt to me like a level playing field.
Yeah.
And so it does exist. There are sports in which I think that works well. I do also wonder if in driving, maybe, you know, because jockeys, for instance, there's no cap on that. I think there used to be concerns around it, but obviously a lighter body is typically going to be a better body on top of a horse, whatever you think of horse racing. I think in things like shooting, where there's no contact, impact, like why wouldn't you just have the best shot? So I do think there are more obvious sports where this should just not be a case or concern. I think also what might be interesting in strength sports is that you can have relative competition. So if everything is based on top numbers, then there's going to be an issue with potentially stratifying by the heaviest. I think when you come to categorizing people by weight, then typically people who are assigned male at birth are going to be more muscular and heavier, and therefore able to lift the biggest total weight. But you have people of all shapes and sizes able to lift, you know, at elite levels 3 times their body weight, for instance. So then if you're judging it on a relative thing, who lifted more on the day as a percentage of their body weight could be a really interesting way to approach competition again.
Yeah.
So that's what I'd like to push for. I think we need to have a sensible conversation around things like impact sports, just generally, you know, where even in football, for instance, heading practice has been reduced because of an actual cause of dementia from repeatedly hitting your head. So I would like to see fewer people with neurodegenerative conditions as a result of sport, for instance.
That's a great point.
So
it comes back to why are we doing this thing that we're doing? In one sport, there's genuine safety issues. Why do we continue to play it in that way? I would say the exact same thing of the gender binary that's created.
Yeah, and you've found success in tennis, haven't you? Against
I wouldn't
people.
call it success.
Well, you've started seasons maybe not picking up as many points and then winning games. And
I think that was another thing that coincided with my gender and sport, which seems to be the topic du jour. Loved tennis as a kid. I played it all the time. It was just something that naturally came to me when I was at school. Before puberty, before I realised that, you know, there was becoming a woman and what femininity looked like, and I spent all of my life pretending to be in that category. Before that happened, I was just me. I was just this sort of beanpole. I had short hair. Again, so I'm back to kind of who I was as a young person, and I found playing tennis really difficult because I would get teased. People would be like, was that a man? Is that a boy playing? And I'd be then put with the girls. I don't want to toot my own horn, but then I would end up winning those matches and want to play at the type of tennis that would be a little bit more aligned with men's tennis. So I just gave it up. I thought, sod this isn't fun, this is mentally quite exhausting. And then coming back to Sheffield, there's a really great club that I go to. I was like, oh yeah, I want to play tennis again. And then I had forgotten some way in the journey that I was going to have to interact with gender again. And that sounds really naive, but I sort of turned up to play, and then immediately it was, women need to play together on this court. This is the men. If you want to play competitively, you're put in a league with your gender or your sex. And it felt really, there's loads of memories from just not fitting in visually. Like I never wanted to I couldn't be seen dead in a tennis dress. My mum used to force them on me. Absolutely not. I think I got as far as t-shirt and shorts that had a flower on them to denote that I was a girl. And then I was hit with it again, and now I think I really care about pushing the boundaries, which is happening in the sport anyway. Tennis is changing to be more interesting, to entertain people. It's seen as a bit of a long sport. It's seen as not quite as culturally exciting as going to watch a basketball game, or you're seeing much more investment in treating tennis players like football stars, trying to drive up tennis. They're quite happy to change the game in that way. There's extreme tennis. Is it called extreme tennis? A version without the tram lines, where it's just the singles court, and it's a faster version so people can enjoy it faster. Quite happy to do that, but God forbid we pit a woman against a man unless it's a big battle of the sexes.
Yeah.
Showdown sort of thing. So I think I'm really, really interested to say in what can we do in a way that allows people to compete and win and achieve that feels safe and free from injury. There's nothing worse than just getting, slated, just like 6-love by somebody else. Nobody enjoys that game. You don't enjoy winning, you don't enjoy playing. Where can you find the balance between queering it up and still achieving those things? And I think it's completely possible.
Yeah, I really like that. It ties a little bit to feelings I've got around Frida Kahlo and Pablo Picasso.
Ooh.
What I liked with Kahlo was an expression of being in her body as it was breaking and not understanding it, and she found a way of expressing and living that was based on the movement she could do. But then the reason why Picasso comes into it, Picasso talks about art in children and art as adults. Picasso spent all of his life trying to paint as if he was a child. And you've described this as well, almost a coming back to how you were essentially before you were gendered, before you were told that you were to grow up as a woman and to wear flowers and dresses. And so this idea of just coming back round, and again, it's the spectrum bit, it's about the living through, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I wonder if we can tie this into the album, and we tie this into a formative experience that you and I shared with your first chin-up.
Yeah.
So what was your feeling like as we got you to that point?
I mean, just dropping the gender point at the moment, I think with what anybody feels, it just felt like I would never be able to do it. And I think a lot of people think about that, about pull-ups and chin-ups, and I don't know, it feels, I think people see somebody do it and think, oh God, I'll never do that. And the discomfort and the pain that your body, like, I think the scariest bit was like jumping up.
Because that's how we approached it, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. We started off by being on the box and then levering myself down and then jumping from the floor. My body just didn't want to do it. It felt like, the hardest bit was the jump because I felt like I was going to fall on my arse. It felt very fear-inducing. It felt impossible. And then being able to do it, I mean, there's nothing smarter that I can say to you other than it was just ace. It's an incredible feeling to be able to do something you didn't think you could do, that you maybe didn't think was for you. I know that sounds crazy because women and non-binary folk do all that type of activity, but I think for myself, I'd seen it as not accessible, and then to do it and achieve it, I don't know. It's a turning point when you do that. Coming back to your earlier point about changing your environment, stepping out of your comfort, doing something different and pushing through discomfort alters, and you're never the same again.
No.
And that's that kind of transformation. And it seems bizarre that we're talking about this as a pull-up. And interesting, you say you don't forget it, actually. You sort of, there is a turning point and a change where you are forever different. And that's how I felt after my first pull-up with Jack Mann. Fitness can help you achieve the transformation.
We won't do any ad runs on that. That's perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we got that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way that you celebrated with the fist pump, and yes, it's just a pure relation. It was like you'd won the Grand Slam, and that's what it should feel like.
Yeah.
I found fitness late. I found the exercise that I like late, but with pull-ups, with chin-ups, with squats, with moving my body in space or moving things away from me, it was something that I could control and exist in and get better at and flow with, to the point where I don't think about things anymore. I've gone back to deadlifts, and fine, I can do twice my body weight without having trained for it in the past 2 years. Because as you say, something changes. You know, your nervous system changes.
Yeah.
And people don't think about it like that, but there is a shift, which means that your brain and your body are better connected when you learn a skill. So whether that is a language or whether that is learning how to lift weight, it will change you.
Yeah.
And that's not typically a bad thing. You're adding to your experience.
Yeah.
And you will typically live longer and a better quality of life if you can grow muscle and learn to move your body in different ways. And I think while we spoke about it earlier, I just want to make sure that it's in this bit. A consequence of you getting your chin up was that you obviously built muscle, and you have described this as affirming, and your gym attire now is tailored to what you're proud of about your physique.
Yeah.
Which is great to see.
Yeah.
And I remember the moment when you came in with your tank top.
Yeah, I think you teased me, as I remember. So instantly felt self-conscious, so thanks for that.
I was so proud of you for having your arms out.
Yeah.
Because I know how much work went into. Yeah.
And I think now that we're talking about it, I never bother doing Instagram reels because what effort. But there was a reel that I did with the videos that you'd taken, and I set it to this, to How We Walk on the Moon track on this album. And I think that song, This Is How We Walk on the Moon, I think is speaking to, do you know what, pushing out of our comfort, understanding to live between categories, understanding that we are human, completely boundless human beings is how we walk on the moon. It's how we understand things differently. It's how we move away from where we're stuck at the moment in our patterns. And I think that summarises the whole conversation perfectly. Walking, moving, that opens up the human psyche, that's fascinating. And I think that's why sport has so much potential. You spoke about art, and you spoke about how artists are able to use that medium to transcend. That's what sport should be able to do. But it's almost like we've tied it down.
Yeah.
And that's heartbreaking to me. Like, the experience I had of doing that pull-up was spiritually, I can't believe this is coming out of my mouth, in Pure Gym in Sheffield was a spiritual moment for me. The whole conversation about sport and gender is the exact opposite of that moment, and that's what most people experience.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a shame that it can't be a medium for accessing spirituality, accessing your identity, in the same way that art can be, because we've drawn so many boundaries over it.
Just,
that's good, isn't it?
That's really good. I'll cut that
You
back
can
in.
put that back in.
Yeah.
I might write a book about this. My chin up, Alanna Reid.
Yeah. I think there's 3 volumes in it.
Yeah, I think there is.
Yeah. Right, should we stop rolling?
Yeah.
So that's it. You don't need to send any money my way. I'm not asking for a cent or penny or peso from you. It is just to let me know that what we're doing is worthwhile. And maybe, as a last bit, to introduce a friend or family member or partner to what it is that we do. Unless, of course, we're going to keep this as our little secret. If you enjoyed that one, I think you might like this one. And why not subscribe if you haven't already, so you never miss an episode again.